but I did miss everything.
Okay. Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
So, of course, today we are working on Torah Temimah. This is the commentary here, and we're working slowly through the Torah, and we're actually on the second parsha of Noach, and we've made some progress here. And here we are talking about a promise that God makes Noah and his descendants after they get off the ark, after the flood and the destruction. God makes this promise and also sets up some rules, some basic rules. And that's what we're looking at. We have been looking at it. And so this is one of the last pieces here, and it says this is talking about if in fact someone commits murder, that is a capital offense. And the way it's said in the text itself, let's take a look at the text. Okay, I have to start before on this page. It says shofech, one who sheds, one who spills dam ha'adam, human blood, Ba'adam, through man, damo yishafech, his blood will be spilled. So essentially, that is giving a court the permission, and in fact, possibly even the obligation to sentence a person to death for having committed murder. So, why so? Ki vetzelem Elohim, because in the image of God, asa et ha'adam, he made man. In other words, God made man. So that is the rule that about a situation which merits capital punishment. So damoy shafech. Of course, in the actual practice of that, and as one reads about it within Jewish law, every effort was made to not take the chance of punishing, of killing someone uh, unjustly, unjustly in the sense of having made a mistake. And we actually know of cases where people had faced capital punishment, and then later on it turned out they were actually innocent. So there are major rules regarding the question of witnesses and how the court has to vote. And in fact, we were looking at 23 judges. You needed 23 judges for a capital case. So anyway, here we go. Damo yishafech, his blood will be spilt. Mikan, and from this statement, his blood shall be spilt. Shekol mita amura bivnei Noach, that whenever it talks about a capital punishment regarding the children of Noah, the descendants of Noah, which generally is understood to mean non-Israelites, because Israelites have a whole different set of rules which are actually stricter to follow. Eina ella b'sayif. It always has to do with basically, literally, it means the sword. Essentially, it means decapitation. That is the way in which the capital punishment is meted out for a non-Jew, for a son of Noah. And as you can see here, we have a footnote, and that's what we're going to look at right here. Umita acheret lo matzino baho. And we don't find any other type of capital punishment regarding them with them. Uvisha'ar mine mitot. And with regards to the other kinds of death penalties, skila, stoning, srefa, burning, vechenek, strangulation, ena shvichutam, there is no blood that is spilt in putting those particular penalties into effect. Um, partially because when it came to stoning, essentially what happened was it wasn't someone being pelted with stones. They essentially they would make sure the person was unconscious, and they would then drop a very heavy stone on them, which would, of course, cause them to expire. Burning, actually, again, the person was uh, basically rendered unconscious. They would by they actually made sure that always happened. And this happens to do within Jewish law, these various different kinds of death penalties. I've explained already before that the reason for the differentiation of penalties had to do with atonement and allowing that person to move into the next life. That immortality is actually a very fundamental element of Jewish belief or Israelite belief, and even though I know we're told otherwise. But I think there is enough evidence, certainly within rabbinic literature, but I think even within the Bible, although there it's more subtle. So, going on. Ki v'tzelem Elohim, right? For in the image of God. So let's take a look at those verses, right? So here it says, v'tzelem osayet Hadam, for God made man in the image of God. And let's see if there's another one here. Let's see. I think there's another verse here, but we'll take a look as we go through this. Okay. So, Haya Omer. He used to say, and we're referring here to Rabbi Akiva. This is actually a quotation from Pirkei Avot. There's the reference, chapter 3, Mishnah 18, paragraph 18 there. Okay. Chaviv Adam, Rabbi Akiva used to say, Chaviv Adam, man is privileged, man is beloved, Shinivra B'Tselem, in the fact that he was created in the image of God. Chiba Yetera Nodatlo, an additional level of privilege or an additional level of being beloved was made known to was known to him. Noda'atlo was made known to him. Shenivra B'Tselem, in the fact that we are aware that we are created in the divine image. So it's one thing to actually be created in the divine image, and it is a higher level to know and to be aware that we are created in the divine image. That's even a higher level of privilege. And how do we know this? Shne'emar, because it says, Ki b'tzelem Elohim asa et Adam, because it has this verse that says, for in the image of God he made man. And that's right there, right? Ki b'tzelem Elohim asa et Adam. So let's take a look now at the Torah Temimah. He has quite a lot to say. Okay, here we go. I want to make sure I didn't leave anything out. Yes. Yeah. Okay. All right. Ulecha ora hu kefel lashon. He says on the surface, right? It seems to just be a repetition of language. In other words, what is Rabbi Akiva, I believe here, saying? Is he just being repetitious? Right? Chaviv Adam, that's the one thing. Chiba yetera noda'at lo, right? A greater level of privilege was made known to him. Okay, became aware of. V'yesh lomar. So isn't it just saying the same thing basically? V'yesh lomar, and one could say Demashe katuv, that the fact that it says Chiba yetera noda'at lo, that it says he was given an added level of privilege, or he was even more beloved. Hakavanahi, that the intention is Chiba yetera her'ah HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the Holy One, blessed be He, showed him a higher level, a greater level of love, of privilege, la'adam, to human beings, bazeh, in the fact, shehodi'o, that God made known to him, shenivra b'tzelem, that he was created in the divine image. Ukemoshe katuv beveitza, and this is what is written. This is like what is written in the tractate Beitza, page Tetvav, Tetzayin, excuse me, page 16 on the A side of the page, Aleph. Hanoten matana, so this is reflecting that. One who gives a gift, if you give someone a gift, lechavero, to his fellow, tzarich lohodio, it's important to let that person know that if you're giving them a gift, you should let them know you're giving them a gift. We could pause on that for a second as to why that's important. I can think of one reason is because a person might think you're only lending it. And to let them know that you're giving them a gift means they know they're not expected to return it or whatever. And I think perhaps even more significant in terms of this particular statement from Beitzah is that it's just as important to let a person know that if the act of giving a gift is an act of love, and generally we would understand a gift as being a loving act, it's important for that person to know that. And when you let them know that you've given them a gift, you give them an additional layer in knowing that you're expressing love to them. So, Uvazeh, he goes on to say, Uvazah, and in this, Necha, it's easy to understand. It's easy to understand. Ma shelo hevi hapasuk hamukdam, the fact that there was actually an earlier verse that talked about God creating human beings in the divine image, but that's not the verse that's being quoted as the proof. Right? Hamukdam beParshat Bereshit, in the Parsha of Genesis. We know that in Genesis, when it talks about God creating human beings, he talks about God creating man in the divine image. Right? It says, Vayivra Elohim et Adam b'tzalmo. It simply says, Elohim, God, Vayivra, created et Adam, human beings, b'tzalmo, in his image. V'chein b'tzelem Elohim bara'oto, and likewise it goes on to say, in the image of God, he created him. So there, why? Why doesn't he quote that verse? Ya'an, because the hatam, because there, siper hakatuv, scripture was only speaking rak seder habriya. It was simply talking about the order of creation. It was simply giving information regarding how God created man. Aval hacha, but here in this particular case, heim hadvarim she'amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu leNoach. These represent, in other words, back there it is simply a narrative, a narration. But here, these are the words she'amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu leNoach levanav. These are actually the words that God spoke to Noah and his sons. Umechuvan lahakavana shekatavnu. And so this sits well, this makes a lot of sense to the intention that we just wrote about, the actual passing on of that information. Okay, going on. Vedok, and that makes sense. It's good. Okay. So going on. Let's take a look if we have another one. Okay, I think that is it for on this particular one. Okay. Going on. Verse 7. So let's take a look at it. Okay, va'atem, and as for you, he just has been talking about murder, right? And the reason why it is a capital offense, right? Va'atem, but as for you, pru urvu, be fruitful and multiply. Shirtzu ba'aretz, in other words, spread out in the earth, multiply in the earth, uruvuba, and multiply in it. So I think here it would mean, to spread out over the earth and multiply in it. Okay, let's take a look here. All right. Pru urvu, be fruitful and multiply. Tanya, this introduces an early source, basically prior to the year 200. Ben Azai Omer, Ben Azai says, Kol Adam she'eno osek befriya uriya, any person who does not attempt to be fruitful and multiply. Ke'ilu, it's as if shofech damim, as if he is shedding blood, umema'et hadamut, and is decreasing man's divine image. Shne'emar, as it states, shofech dam ha'adam, it says the one who sheds the blood of a human being, ba'adam, with man, adamo yishafech, it says through his blood will be spilt. Ki b'tzelem Elohim, and going on to say, Ki b'tzelem Elohim asa et adam, because he made man in the divine image. V'chativ batre, and right after that, v'atem pru'upu, and right after that it says, but as for you, be fruitful and multiply. So again, this certainly strikes me as a difficult, a challenging interpretation. I think we have to understand that any of these kinds of statements have to be filtered through circumstances and to just understand, on the one hand, how important it is to procreate. That procreation is something very important, and not to sort of take these kinds of things personally if one situation tends to parallel what he's talking about on the negative side of things. But I think it's just to understand how important it is, but to also understand that things, and there are many, many cases where Jewish law was originally stated one way, but subsequently is modified to fit circumstances better. So it's like Torah is like pure mathematics, and oral Torah is like applied mathematics. And we know that when you have to apply theory, you have to really, really look at circumstances, because that's what's going to happen as you try to apply these things. So let's take a look. V'Iyin b'Rashi, and check out Rashi, the Rashi commentary, Chulin, in the tractate Chulin, Tzadik Aleph Bet. That would be uh, 91, page 91, on the B side of the page. Divrei hamatchil b'diuk no. There's the introductory phrase where Rashi makes his comment is this word b'diuk no, which means in his image, and the word dioken sounds a lot, and it is related to the word icon, the Greek word icon, image. Okay. Going on. That's all he has to say about that. Velo yeh. So let's go to the next one here. Let's see what we're looking at. We can keep going on here. I'm looking to see if there's some verses we can take a look at here. Okay. Okay. So here it goes on. Vayomer Elohim el Noach. God said to Noach, Be'el Banav, and to his sons Ito, with him, Lamor, saying, Va'ani, as for me, Hineni mekim et briti itchem, I will establish my covenant with you, Ve'et zarachem acharechem, and with your seed following you, in other words, all your descendants, Ve'et kol nefesh hachaya, and also with all the living creatures, asher itchem, which are with you, ba'of, whether it's in the fowl, the birds of the air, fowl, babhema, cattle, uvachol chayat haaretz, and the beasts of the earth, itchem, which are with you, mikol, from all yotzei teva, all that went forth from the ark, lachol chayat haaretz, to all the beasts of the field. Let me just make sure I have it. Okay. V'hakimoti et briti etchem, and I will establish my covenant with you. V'lo yikaret kol basar od mimei hababul, that all the flesh will no longer be cut off from the waters of the flood. V'lo ye od mabul l'shachet haaretz, and never will there be another flood to destroy the earth. Vayomer Elohim, and God said, Zot ot habrit, this is the sign of the covenant. Asher ani noten, which I am giving, beini uveinechem, between myself and you, uvein kol nefesh hachaya, and between all the living creatures, asher itchem, which are with you, ledorot olam, for all generations. Et kashti natati be'anam, I have set my bow in the cloud, v'haita la'od brit, and it shall be a sign as a covenant, beini uvein haaretz, between me and the earth. V'haya, and so it shall be, ba'anani anan haaretz, when I place clouds over the earth, v'nir ata hakeshet be'anan, and the bow is seen in the clouds. V'zacharti et briti, I will remember my covenant, asher beni uveinechem, which is between me and you, uvein kol nefesh chaya, and between all the living creatures, bechol basar amongst all flesh. V'lo yeh od hamayim, and no longer will the water, the mabul, become a flood, l'shachet kol basar, in order to destroy all flesh. So one thing I like to point out is that, we know that rainbows are beautiful. People tend to say, see it as, they talk about, the story about the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, those sorts of things. It's seen generally in the common culture as something very positive. But the truth is that in this biblical tradition, the rainbow appears to remind God not to destroy the world, which would imply that if you see a rainbow, it means that at that particular moment, the world is at a level of wickedness where, had God not made this promise, God would be sending a flood. So it's rather a wake-up call for us, for Jews who follow the Torah, rather than saying, "Oh, how beautiful! There's a pot of gold at the end of it." Not that we really believe that, but even metaphorically, I think there's symbolism involved in that particular statement. Anyway, going into this, right, for lo yeh, etc., there no longer will be a flood, etc. Amar Rabbi Elazar, said Rabbi Elazar, love, when you say this word love, no longer, lo yeh, love is the Aramaic form of law in Hebrew. Shvu'ah, it's an oath, it's taking an oath, simply saying no, right? With this kind of statement, it is taking an oath. Why? Dichtiv, because it says v'lo yeh od hamayim lababul, because it says no longer will the waters ever become a flood. So there's the law, right? Uchtiv, and another time it says in Isaiah, chapter 54, Ki me Noach zotli, for this to me is like the waters of Noah, asher nishbati, in that I swore. And there's the word shvu'ah, right? I swore. Amar Rava, so said Rava, another authority from the later period, the Talmudic period. V'hu de amar lav trezimne. That applies only if he says no, no twice. In other words, he makes a statement where he says not, meaning, in a sense, I swear I will not, right? But it has to be two times. Why? Dichtiv, because it says, now we're talking about verse 11, V'lo yikaret kol basar od mimei hamabul, no longer shall the flesh, or never again will flesh be cut off or destroyed from the waters of the flood. V'lo yeh od hamayim lamabul, and there's the two laws, right? Two laws, and no longer will there be water to create a flood. In other words, will be flood waters. In other words, to destroy. We know they're floods, and we know they're damaging and sometimes devastating, but not in a universal sense. That's the promise, that it'll never universally take place. Taking a look we can get started in this. It's a long, long comment, so we probably won't get this done today, but here we go. Umefaresh begamara, right? That this is it's explained in the Gemara, in the Talmud, dehu hadin, that all the more so, hein nami shvu'ah, that when you use the word yes, it can also be in the context of an oath, that it can mean an oath, taking an oath. Desvarahi, because it's logical, midalav shvu'ah, right? That if saying no is taking an oath, or can be taken an oath, hein nami shvu'ah, the word hein, yes, can also be taking an oath. V'lachein, and for this reason, gam behein, that when it comes to this word hein, indeed, right? Yes. Tzarich sheyomar trezimne, we apply also that principle that it has to be said twice in this particular statement. Now we get into something that is a little more analytical here. V'habach, the Bach stands for Bayit Chadash, and he is one of the principal commentators on the Shulchan Aruch, on the Code of Jewish Law. So here we go. Sorry, the Bach is also a commentary on the Talmud, right? We also have, I believe, the Bach is a one of the commentators who looks carefully at the version of the Talmud, at the text itself, and makes emendations as necessary, having examined either other manuscripts or possibly the Bach also uh, makes these notes because of making sense out of the Talmudic text. At any rate, Hegia means that the Bach sets up the text, right? He reads the text. He changes the version of the text, right? Kan, here in this place, he has a version of the text, Baha She'amar, in the fact, so I think this is the quotation, or this is a note he makes, Baha She'amar Vahu, right? In the fact that he says, and the Shvehud Amar, the fact that the text here says, love, tre zimne, right? That it says, love, no, twice. Denir Eli, okay? And he says, because it appears to me, I think that's what this abbreviation is, dichtiv, because it states, v'lo yikaret kol basar od mimei hamabul, that's the verse that we were reading, no longer will the flesh be cut off from the waters of the flood, v'lo yeh od mabul l'shachet haaretz, nor will there be another flood to destroy the earth. So that's v'chativ, and in addition it states, "V'lo yeh od hamayim lamabul." No longer will water serve to flood the earth the way it has. A mabul is a complete flood like this. And as you have probably picked up already, ulechora, right? Hagahazot, and it would appear from this particular note, Tmu'ah ma'od. This is a very strange statement. Why? Because according to this, shlosha lavin nemru bazeh. We now have three cases of this word love, of this word no. Aval be'emet. So, but he goes on to say, be'emet, tov tam bahagaha hazor. Actually, this statement that he makes, this note that he makes, and please forgive me, I think I misinformed you when I said the Bach is a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. Yes, Judith, please. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, okay,
This
I
goes
know.
back a little ways,
Okay,
but
sorry, I didn't catch your raising your hand. Forgive me. Yeah, go ahead.
um, it you said Mabul was the big flood
Right,
and the one that won't happen again.
right.
But my it was recently said in synagogue that the one in Psalm 29.
Yeah, go ahead. I don't know if you got muted by mistake. I lost you when you said some and then 20. It sounded like 29, but I couldn't really hear. I'm going to stop the share for now. Let me just make a marking here because I think next time we'll take another look at this particular phrase. And I apologize for the misinformation on the Bach. Okay, let's see here. Okay. All right, let me stop the share. Judith, you are muted. Can you unmute?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Go for it. You were saying.
Um, well, you said Mabul was the big flood,
Yes.
the Noah flood that's never
Right.
going to happen again.
Right.
But I remember recently the rabbi in the shul where I go on Shabbat morning
Yes.
saying that the one in Psalm 29 where it says God sat on the Mabul.
Yes.
Mabu Yaakov,
Right.
was
Yes.
not that flood, was not
Oh, really?
Noah's flood.
Okay. Hmm.
Um, okay, I'll go back and ask him.
Yeah, I would have to, yeah, I would have to ask him about it too, because, again, I'd want to look at I don't have Psalm 29 in front of me, but on the other hand, I could understand it as referring to the great flood, and that Psalm 29 is trying to say that, that God, that to try and sort of describe God's greatness and God's power, you know, and also God as judge of the universe, in the fact that God was above the flood. So understanding that in fact was the context. So I need to understand, not to say that sometimes more than one interpretation is possible, but it makes more sense to me to the degree that I can reflect on the verse you just said and am somewhat familiar that actually what it's saying is, and the Mabul being so early too, also trying to describe, in this literary kind of way, the ancient, in other words, how God was present from the dawn of time and even before the dawn of time, and that God is above all these forces that affect us so much as human beings, and that actually God is in control of all those forces that affect us as human beings. So I would think it is talking about the Mabul, the original Mabul, right? So I
Okay,
know that,
I'll
go
go
ahead.
back and look at that.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know. I think the spiritual says God said fire, not a flood next time. Is that
I know
literal?
it's been that statement that, you can look at it and see, and sadly, that could refer to atomic war. Sadly. Yeah. But I think, we can try and take hope that human beings, I mean, I am more and more keenly aware the degree to which our prayers, I became very aware in counting Omer, because in counting Omer, there is a verse from one of the Psalms. The Psalm itself has exactly 49 words in it. And there is a verse in that psalm that has 49 letters in it. So each word is associated with a day in the counting of the Omer. And in this particular verse, every letter is associated with a unique day in the counting of the Omer. And it occurred to me that the symbolism of having letters represent days of the Omer are also possibly ways of saying that we are just, that we need to, that it's a sensitization of the fact that every word has divine significance, meaning that in a sense, God can be found in every word. And not only that, but God can be found in every letter. And in a way, it's an amazing kavanah for when we pray and what we're trying to accomplish when we pray. In other words, that we're trying to establish a very deep connection to our divine origins and to God. And in fact, when you look at the content of so many of the prayers, they all point to the idea of God being united with the universe. That instead of the universe and the human behavior in the universe as being in rebellion against divine authority, that in fact people recognize just to what degree our lives, the letters of our words, the very fact that we have something called writing, which, by the way, has an immortal level to it, right? There's a level of immortality that writing allows us, and to see this as something, as a divine gift and a divine manifestation. So that's just occurred to me as I was counting Omer and realizing, why, asking myself, what was the significance of every word in the psalm? First of all, the psalm being selected, and then every word representing a different day. And not only that, but even every letter representing a different day in the Omer. Yeah. Okay. I need to look it up. Um, Hmm. Uh, it'll take me a moment to find it. What I'll do is I'm going to pause the recording for a second while I look it up, okay? Give me a moment.
Thank-
So it is uh, let's see, 67, Psalm 67. And if you
Yes,
have an art
67.
if you have an art scroll Siddur, you'll find the counting of the Omer on page 282. All right, that's where this starts. And then if you turn to page 286, you'll see a chart which actually allows you to look at the letters, right? So it's got the 49 things. Okay, and what I have done, I'll show you a picture of what I've done with my Siddur, if you can see. Do you see how I've put a number over every letter to get
Mm.
to the 49? All right. And then on here, I have the verse. If you look there, do you see how I have a different letter next to every number? Okay, that represents the verse which is Yismachu, right? Yismachu virananu leumim ki tishpot ami mishor. That's a verse. Let me see if I can say. Nations will be glad and sing for joy because you will judge the people fairly and guide the nations on earth, Selah. That's the verse that has 49 letters in it. And so every day there's a different letter associated with it. So
And you said page 286. I
that's
don't
in my
have an art
edition
scroll.
anyway. Yeah, page
Which one of
282
them should? And 282 and
is
286.
correct. Correct. Yeah. I mean,
I will
that's
go get that.
from page 282, the bottom of page 282 to page 87 has the service for counting the Omer.
Mhm.
The Art Scroll Theater. So it's very cool that this particular psalm has 49 words. But as you can see, if you listen to my translation of it, you see how this is all about our praying that God's presence be unified with humanity. That when human beings realize the divine level of existence, that the world will be transformed. And that's essentially what we are trying to accomplish, is to connect ourselves to that divine origin, that divine root, and also to pray that the world recognizes this as well. And this, in a sense, is summarized by Aleinu, the prayer Aleinu, and also the Kaddish. The Kaddish itself is also a direct statement of asking, praying that God's name be unified with creation, that creation acknowledge its divine origin. So I will stop the recording with this.